In early 1943 and 1944, German tanks, particularly the Tiger I and the Panther, were a formidable force on both the western and eastern fronts due to their seemingly impenetrable armor. The frontal armor of the Tiger was so thick that the ordinary armor-piercing AP shells from most Allied anti-tank guns would simply flatten upon impact, failing to penetrate. Allied soldiers were desperate. Their shells couldn't even scratch the enemy. At this time, German troops considered themselves the undisputed masters of the battlefield. For them, destroying a tank meant hitting it repeatedly or finding its vulnerable side armor. But soon, a new and terrifying ammunition would enter the battlefield, breaking all established rules of armored warfare. This mysterious ammunition was known as heat high-explosive anti-tank, and its foundation lay in an old, but recently proven scientific principle known as the Munroe Effect, or what the military called the shaped charge. This was no ordinary explosion. Inside the heat shell, the explosive was arranged in a special conical shape, backed by a thin metal liner, often copper. When the shell struck the tank's armor, the explosive detonated just before impact. This blast did not concentrate its energy outwards, but rather inwards. This concentrated energy transformed the copper liner into an extremely intense, plasma-like jet molten metal jet, traveling faster than the speed of sound and reaching temperatures of thousands of degrees Celsius. When Allied soldiers first fired these heat rounds from their small, lightweight weapons such as the American Bazooka and the British PIAT Tiger tanks, the results were astonishing. A small, portable rocket or mortar-like weapon was penetrating armor that heavy artillery could not breach. For the German tank crews, it was incomprehensible. The shell would explode, and a small, clean hole would appear in the armor, through which the jet of molten metal would enter the tank's interior. The scene inside the tank was horrifying. The jet would incinerate the crew and ammunition with intense heat, instantly disabling the tank. German soldiers immediately began calling it Teufelgeschoss, or the Devil's Shell, and Schwarze Kunst, or black magic, because no ordinary projectile could melt through such massive iron armor so easily. There was widespread panic in German military reports. Their experts discovered that the heat jet wasn't literally melting the armor, but rather using extreme pressure and heat to transform it into a devastating stream of liquid metal that would puncture the armor and savagely penetrate the tank's interior. This jet was so thin that it was largely independent of the armor thickness. Whether the armor was 5 inches thick or 10 inches thick, if the shaped charge detonated correctly, the jet would pass through it. This meant that even their heaviest tanks were now vulnerable to a weapon carried by a simple foot soldier. These shells gave rise to asymmetrical warfare on the battlefield, where an infantryman could destroy the largest tank. In response to this black magic, the Germans were forced to upgrade their tanks. Since the heat shell was indifferent to the armor's thickness, they began installing Schwarze armor skirts. These were thin metal plates hung away from the sides of the tank. The purpose was to make the HEAT round impact these outer plates and detonate prematurely. If the shell detonated before reaching the tank's main armor, the metal jet would lose its focused power, dissipating in the air before it could penetrate the interior. This was a temporary solution, but it made the job harder for the Allied infantry. Nevertheless, the sheer abundance of weapons like the Bazooka and PIAT gave the Allies a critical new advantage in the war. The heat round was one of the most important technological innovations of World War II. It didn't just melt tanks. It melted the strategy of armored warfare itself. The technology that German soldiers initially called black magic or the devil's shell was, in reality, precisely guided physics. It proves that on the battlefields of the Second World War, the greatest destruction often came from the simplest, yet most secretly developed scientific principles.